Welcome back to the Below Average Joe's MMA show and the fourth installment of the State of the UFC. We are going over UFC Denver, UFC Vegas 94, and most recently UFC 304. If you are new to this channel and if you are new to this video series that is happening here on the YouTube channel, this is the breakdown of how it goes. We will go through all three of those events as listed in terms of the number of finishes, number of decisions, number of fights in each division, and then take a look at how the rankings were directly affected after that event. Once we go through up until the most recent pay-per-view, we will go into the debutantes that had big showcases in their first UFC fight. We will discuss what is next coming in the next installment, and we will touch on the pound for pound rankings and how they sit. Again, this video drops every month after every UFC pay-per-view. So we will start with UFC Denver. It was headlined by Rose Namajunas and Tracy Cortez. Let's jump into the action. UFC Denver was originally slated to be headlined by Rose Namajunas and Macy Barber. Macy Barber was not cleared to make her return to the octagon and fight in that matchup, so in stepped short notice replacement Tracy Cortez. We saw this card feature 12 total fights with 3 knockouts, 3 submissions, 5 decisions, and 1 no contest. There were 2 fights in the middleweight division, 3 fights at welterweight, 1 fight in the lightweight, featherweight, bantamweight, and flyweight divisions, and 3 fights in the women's flyweight division, including the main event. In that main event, we saw the number 6 ranked Rose Namajunas defeat the number 11 ranked Tracy Cortez via unanimous decision, and as a result, Rose Namajunas, the former strawweight champion, now on a 2-fight win streak at flyweight, moved from number 6 to number 5, and Tracy Cortez moved back from number 11 to number 12. And indirectly affected by these fight results, we had Jessica Andrade ranked at number 5, drop down to number 6, and we had the number 12 ranked Karine Silva rise up to number 11. And also in the flyweight division, we saw the number 15 ranked Jasmine Jasudavicius defeat UFC short notice debutant Fatima Klein via unanimous decision, and because of that victory, Jasmine continues her momentum and moves from number 15 to number 14. And from UFC Denver, we will transition to Las Vegas, Nevada, the UFC Apex for UFC Vegas 94. It was headlined by Amanda Lemos and Virna Jandiroba. This fight card featured 11 fights with 4 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 5 decisions. We saw 1 fight at heavyweight, 2 fights at lightweight, 3 at featherweight, 1 at bantamweight and featherweight, 2 fights in the women's flyweight division, and 1 fight, the headliner, in the strawweight division. In that main event, we saw the number 5 ranked Virna Jandiroba submit the number 3 ranked former title challenger Amanda Lemos in round number 2. Virna now rides a 4-fight win streak, none bigger than this main event slot, and she took that number 3 spot away from Lemos, and Lemos went from number 3 to number 5. A pretty much simple flip-flop. And in the flyweight division, we saw Bruno Silva extend his win streak to 4. All 4 of those victories are via stoppage, none bigger than this one right here against the 14th ranked flyweight Cody Durden. He got a TKO victory in round number 2, a fight that he had to come back in. Bruno cracked into the rankings for the first time and now sits at number 14, or at least at the end of this card was sitting at number 14. You'll see why I worded it that way in just a second. And Cody Durden went from 14 to unranked. And last but not least, most recently, we go across the pond to Manchester, England. UFC 304 headlined in the welterweight division by the championship fight between Leon Edwards and Bilal Muhammad that went down in the brand new Co-op Live Arena. This English card saw 14 fights go down on the docket with 2 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 9 decisions. 2 fights at heavyweight, 1 fight at light heavyweight, 1 fight at middleweight, 3 at welterweight, 1 fight at lightweight, 2 at featherweight, 1 at bantamweight, 1 at flyweight, and 2 fights in the women's strawweight division. And we have a lot of moving parts here to discuss in terms of the rankings. We start in that main event because the number 2 ranked Bilal Muhammad got a very convincing victory and became the new welterweight champion of the world. To do so, he had to beat Leon Edwards. And because of that victory, Bilal obviously went from number 2 to the champion. And the champion, Leon Edwards, went from champion to number 1. And former champion Kamaru Usman went from number 1 to number 2. In the co-main event, we saw Tom Aspinall successfully defend his interim title for the first time. Crazy we're talking about successfully defending an interim champion, but that's a discussion for another day. Tom holds on to the IC ranking, and the number 4 ranked Curtis Blades dips back to number 5, and the number 5 ranked Sergey Pavlovich rises up to number 4. Paddy Pimblett is now 6-0 in the UFC, and his biggest win to date comes via first round submission over King Green, who is ranked number 15 in these lightweight ranks. Paddy is now sitting at number 15, finally in the rankings for the UFC, and King Green dipped out of the rankings from number 15 to unranked. Arnold Allen got a huge bounce back victory, ended his 2-fight skid by getting a unanimous decision victory over the number 10 ranked Giga Chikadze. Not a lot of movement here, but for what it's worth, Arnold did go from number 6 to number 5. And this is where things get wild and crazy, so bear with me, hold on tight, fasten your seatbelt. We saw the number 6 ranked Muhammad Mokaev defeat the number 8 ranked Manel Kape via unanimous decision. That seems simple and straight to the point, right? Wrong. Muhammad Mokaev will not, at least as of the day I'm recording this, which is Wednesday, July 31st, 2024, he will not be re-signed by the UFC. I'm not getting into all the drama here because I did that in the recap show. Go check it out if you haven't already. Shameless plug. But because of the UFC taking Muhammad Mokaev out of the rankings pool, not re-signing him back to the organization, he is completely removed from the rankings, and that caused a whole lot of drama. So here we go. The number 8 ranked Manel Kape, who is still with the UFC as of now, drops back to number 9 after his loss. And then everything else rises, rises, rises. We have Alex Perez go from number 7 to number 6. We have number 9 ranked Matheus Nicolau go from number 9, I already said that, but I said it again, to number 7. So he rose 2 spots. And every single other fighter behind them rose exactly 1 spot. So we go from Cody Durden, who just dipped out of the rankings, is now back in at number 15. Bruno Silva, who just came in at number 14, is now number 13. And everything else ahead and in between of them also went up a spot, including Tim Elliott, Matt Schnell, Tagir Ulanbekov, and Asu Almabayev. So that is it for the card by card breakdown and stats. Now we will get into the totals, where we saw 37 fights between these 3 cards with 9 KO TKOs, 8 submissions, 19 decisions, and 1 no contest for a finishing rate percentage of 45.9. So we're back on the come up from last month. It was pretty low, if I'm not mistaken, in the 30s in terms of the finishing percentage. So we are closing in back to a 50-50 slate here. And in terms of the divisional breakdown, it goes as follows. The heavyweight division saw 3 fights. The light heavyweight division saw 1. The middleweight division saw 3. Welterweight saw 6. Lightweight had 4. Featherweight had 6. Bantamweight and flyweight both had 3. The women's bantamweight division had a whopping 0 fights throughout these last 3 cards. The women's flyweight division had 5 fights, including a main event. And the women's strawweight division had 3 fights, including a main event. So for the first time, we saw a tie for the most fights by division. It was the welterweight and featherweight division. They both had 6 fights. And for the third time in 4 videos of this series, definitely the second, but I think the third out of 4, the women's bantamweight division clocks the lowest amount of fights. And this time around, they literally didn't even have 1. From the totals, we will now go to the pound for pound rankings. I like to finish each show off with the pound for pound rankings. We already talked about how each card directly affected the rankings. Now we will look at the end of the month, after every pay-per-view, where do we sit in the men's and women's rankings for pound for pound. The men actually saw quite a bit of movement, so we will briefly go over that here. Number one is still the pound for pound king, Islam Makhachev. He obviously defended his title at UFC 302 in June. And number 15 is now Charles do Bronx Oliveira, who dipped down not number two. He dipped down 2 spots from 13 to 15. Really, you can see the big wrench thrown into this was Bilal Muhammad going from unranked all the way to number 6 in the world for the pound for pound rankings after extending his unbeaten streak to 11 and knocking off the former champion Leon Edwards. Leon took a direct hit from that and dipped down 2 spots from number 5 to number 7. Ilia Topuria rose a spot. Sean O'Malley, who's headlining in September at Noche UFC, rose a spot. And we also saw Tom Aspinall rise 2 spots to number 9 after defending that interim championship. And as you can see by the women's pound for pound rankings, there was a little bit less drama because there was no large movements that occurred. Even after 2 women's main events, 2 highly touted ranked women's main events, no movement on the side of Rose Namajunas, who remains at number 7, and Virna Jandiroba is in there at number 13. Other than that, Alexa still tops the list at number 1, and Amanda Lemos is now at the bottom of the list at number 15. The next spot would usually be reserved for UFC debutantes that got victories in their first UFC fight, but for the first time in this series, not one UFC debutant got a win in their first fight. So with that said, we will move into the closing portion of the series, and it is simple. What will be next? In the 5th installment of this video series in August, or later on this August, being that it's August 1st, what will we discuss? Well, it will be UFC Abu Dhabi, headlined by Corey Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. That is going down this coming weekend when I'm recording this. UFC Vegas 95 will be a bout between 2 top 10 heavyweights, Marcin Tybura and Sergey Spivak. And lastly will be UFC 305, a big time battle for the middleweight championship, as Dricus du Plessis will look to defend his title for the first time. And to do that, he will have to defeat Israel Adesanya. If you enjoyed this series, please be sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new. You can look forward to this every single month, as well as previews and breakdowns of every single fight card every week. I go over the biggest and best storylines and what is at stake in all of the big fights. I recap the most meaningful results from every card every week, and I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. Be sure to join the community on social media at the BAJ MMA and follow along on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, as I release audio podcast episodes every Friday and Monday. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next video.